Hello guys, Ethan here. Welcome to our channel Anime Fantasy. Join us as we explore the world of anime and fantasy and bring you the best stories and discussions. This is the second part of What If Naruto Was an Attack on Titan. So give this video a like and subscribe for more videos in future. Naruto POV. He was standing atop the roof of a small house gazing out at the vast plains of this unknown place. It was an amazing sight to behold. Lush grass as far as the eye could see dominated the field, the illuminated in red fire by the waning light of the sun as it dipped towards the western horizon. The light warmth of the setting sun enveloped him. A gentle breeze ruffled his hair and he closed his eyes briefly, breathing in a lungful of fresh air. Suddenly a wave of memories washed over him, disturbing his moment peace. A legion of mounted soldiers, Titan bodies hitting the ground, a tall blonde man, most likely the leader, and a short raven-haired man. An agreement to meet in the forest of massive trees. Feeling conflicted, he ticked off what he knew. On the one hand, he'd finally found the people that he'd been looking for these past days, and it had filled him with relief. However, that fleeting sense of relief had been washed away like a leaf in the wind the moment they'd opened their mouths. What was that aggressive-sounding language that they had spoken? With all those sounds, it had kind of sounded like the static noise you'd get from faulty communication devices. He hadn't been able to glean a single word from his brief conversation with the two, except that the blonde tall one was named Ruin, while the short grumpy-looking one was Rivi. In all his time traveling with Jerem, he'd never heard any language remotely like it. Actually, now that he thought about it, he'd never even heard of anyone speaking any other language besides the common tongue. He felt his heart steadily sinking into his stomach as a worrying thought struck him. What if I'm not in the elemental nation? The world outside of the elemental nations remained a mystery. No one had ever found anything besides endless ocean. If there were other continents besides the elemental nations, then it wasn't too far-fetched to assume that they'd speak a different language, but that didn't explain the absence of chakra. He hadn't detected any chakra from those people, not even the most minuscule amount. How could that be? It made no sense. It was a fundamental fact in the world that all living, breathing creatures had both spiritual and physical energy that together made chakra, though only individuals trained in the arts could harvest it. And secondly, how did one end up on the other side of the world without even realizing? Could this be the work of some space-time and jutsu? He knew that Kakashi had a space-time jutsu related to his main Chikayo sharing, and that allowed him to transport things to another dimension. His thought process came to an abrupt halt. No, a pit formed in his stomach. No, it couldn't be. Could this be some alternate dimension, another world entirely? Those odd giants and people without chakra, and the sudden decrease of nature energy. Much of what he'd seen would make sense if it were so. He shook his head vehemently. He needed to focus on what was right ahead of him. He'd already found people, and they would be waiting for him in the forest. He'd meet up with them and find a way home. Who knows, perhaps they had someone who spoke his tongue. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, he let his mind drift to other matters, such as the soldiers themselves. He studied them intently during their short interaction. Their uniforms consisted of white pants and shirts with brown leather boots and a jacket worn underneath a green hooded cloak. They had no visible armor to protect against blades or projectiles. Not that it would help them against titans, of course, seeing as they could make you a human-sized bloody smear on the ground with their bare hands. No, they valued mobility over anything else, which is why the clothes were light and didn't restrict any movement, and those leather belt straps bound to their bodies were probably meant to make their clothes catch as little of the wind as possible during flight. Considering the thin layer of dust and grime covering their uniforms, they must have riding for a while, perhaps a day, maybe two more, if they were able to find places to rest the horses without endangering themselves. Then there was their strange equipment to consider: two metal containers fastened to each hip that allowed them to shoot grapple hooks into surfaces, then reel them, and somehow all controlled by peculiar detachable sword hilts. The most curious thing by far, though, had been their reactions when seeing him. By the looks of astonishment and disbelieving murmuring, he'd assumed they hadn't expected to find him, or anyone for that matter, probably since the area was teeming with titans. He didn't think it warranted such looks of gobsmacked bafflement, though one would have thought they'd never seen a human in their life before. Popping his neck, he turned to look back towards the forest peeking just over the horizon. It was frustrating. He'd run all the way out here just to turn and head straight back. What a drag! Leaping off the rooftop, he landed on the wood and rock-littered ground just off the house. There were other houses too, all wrecked to some degree. It was a mess. To put it lightly, from the outside it didn't look like much more than a shed. Perhaps it had once been enough to shelter a man and his small family, but now it laid in ruin. A portion of the front wall collapsed inwards, likely caused by a titan. Careful not to tread on any wayward shards of glass sticking up from the ground, he set out in a chakra-enhanced sprint through the grassy plains and towards the forest. The grass rose to his shins, flattened in waves with each gust of wind, only to spring up again as fresh as a bunch of flowers right after it. Reminded him of the uniform green of the meadows back home that almost looked calmed. Overhead a congregation of clouds lit up the blue, each of them sensing the presence of the sun filtering through brilliant sunshine that caressed him in its warm embrace. He ran with the wind, feet light and silent except for the light crunching of grass underfoot, until at last he reached the forest. There it stood proudly in all its primitive oak-brown grandeur, knotted arms rising ever upwards, trying to touch the clouds, almost as thick as a man is tall. At first it had reminded him of the forest of death in Kano, but with each passing second he came to see how little they resembled each other. Yes, the trees were enormous, but that was about where the resemblance ended. Where the forest of death was a haunting sight that could instill fear in the hearts of anyone who ventured into it, this one was a haven of life and serenity. The forest of death was a macabre place, drab and gray, while this one bloomed with colors. Wild basil grew freely on the clumpy mossy mattress of the floor, the simpering wind carrying its fragrance. It was spirit refreshing to smell the mulchy mix of the forest perfume. Scent fresh and organic, he spotted a turquoise blue stream that wound its way merrily through the forest. Splashing and burbling as it swerved, it jumped for joy over time, warm rocks sparkling like diamonds blessed with inner fire. When the sun hit it just right, he'd heard it said once that the streams and rivers were the arteries of the forest, but this stream seemed to have a liquid soul of its own. He leaped up to one of the branches, landing softly, as to not disturb the peaceful silence, and looked for any signs of soldiers nearby. He saw none, but that wasn't strange considering the sheer size of the forest. It would take a considerable number of soldiers to cover this entire area, and was it even wise to approach them so casually? Perhaps a more subtle approach would be wiser. Gather some information before he revealed himself. They could be hostiles. For all he knew, they were soldiers after all. Silently he leapt upwards from branch to branch until he reached the canopy, and blending with the shadows started looking for soldiers. POV swap. Eld sighed exasperatedly. Give it a rest, all you. Oh, what it's true, isn't it? They expect us to find a single person in this huge ass forest. You could hide a titan here and no one would be the wiser. Oh, hush you, stop whining like a baby and get back to searching. Petra scolded, and stop being so noisy. We don't want to alert any titans that might be nearby. Besides, Gunther added, it's not just some random farmer or civilian we're searching for. The commander said that this might be someone from outside the walls, someone who can shed light on whether or not there are any other civilizations out there. I still don't believe what they say about him jumping from 40 meters high and sustaining no injury, taking down titans with his bare hands. Yeah, right, I'll believe that when pigs start to fly. So you're calling Commander Irwin and Corporal Levy liars then? HM Held said with a smirk. Instead of replying, all you all looked up through the uniformly green canopy and into the endlessly blue sky. Also, if the guy spoke a foreign language, how do we even know he understood to come back here? Suddenly something darted overhead, disappearing so quickly it made him wonder if he was imagining things. Hey, did you guys see that too? Asked the others, pointing upwards. Hussy, what did you see? Something? I didn't see anything. Something just flew by overhead like a shadow. I swear. Petra mounted her horse, moving ahead of the others. It was probably just some bird or a squirrel. No, it wasn't that. He jostled his horse to follow, but the horse buckled, making him bite tongue and cut him off mid-sentence. Sighing at his antics, the others followed after Petra. Naruto POV. He released the breath he'd been holding, and that had been a close one. That constipated-looking guy had almost found him out. To be honest, he'd never been too skilled at infiltration and information gathering. He was loud and obnoxious and clumsy at times, according to his friends at least, but being discipled to an expert at the stuff had helped him a lot. Winds to an oral let out a strangled scream of pain. Only a few minutes into searching, and he'd stumbled across the four of them riding some distance away. They were searching for something, most likely him, and it had occurred to him to just go up and say hi, but where was the fun in that? Besides, Kakashi had always told him to think before acting, and it didn't take a genius to know that waltzing into a foreign military encampment wasn't a bright idea. So he decided to spy on them, gather some intel, and evaluate his next course of action. Afterwards, his investigation until now hadn't yielded any vital information, the language barrier making it difficult to learn anything of significance. Firstly, they were a tight bunch. The atmosphere between them was relaxed, and they seemed to be chatting pretty amicably. Gunta was the quiet one. He rarely spoke unless someone asked for his input, and seemed to be a pretty chill person all around. He was of average height with slicked back black hair and a bulbous nose. The tall and blonde one named Eldo was the appointed leader of their group. He rode ahead, directing the group to their next location, and the others appeared to look to him for orders. Oral was complainer with a permanent frown marring his face that made him look like an old man, and hair like a dying plant. The last one was a petite girl by the name of Pedora, pretty short, kind looking, and with auburn hair that about summed up what he'd been able to gather so far. He scowled. Stupid language barrier, now this wouldn't do. Coming to a quick decision, he smirked mischievously. Top swap snap. There it was again. All you checked his surroundings for the 100th time. All you all listen, man, there's no one behind us, there's no one following us. Stop being so paranoid, man, it's putting the rest of us on edge. Else at TCH whatever. All you retorted. He couldn't help it. Every once in a while he'd hear a twig snap or a bush rustle. Sometimes he even thought he heard footsteps, only to whip his head around and find absolutely nothing there. It was driving him nuts. The others thought he was being paranoid, of course, but it didn't matter. He would show them soon enough if this was that four-eyed freak hand idea of a prank. She had another thing coming. Subtly gripping his 3DMG handles, he readied himself any moment. Now wrestle. He sprang into action, leaping off his horse and shooting his cables into the closest tree to the bush where the sound had emanated from. He propelled himself forward in the blink of an eye. Aha, he yelled triumphantly, jumping around the bush to find the squirrel. His grinful. What happened? You all right? Did you spot a titan? The others were at his side in a flash, their faces sealed with grim determination. They hide their surroundings, warily expecting to have to fight for their lives in any moment. All you what in the name of Wall? Maria Petra poked her head over his shoulder to see what he was glaring at. An icy chill racked his spine. Something hit him over the head, and suddenly his face was getting acquainted with the mud. Petra glared down at him, fists firmly planted on her hips. Are you crazy? We thought a titan was coming to attack us. You nearly gave me a heart attack. His mud-smeared face rose from the ground to peer up at her. Petra, listen, no I don't Want to hear it all? You all cheat his blades with a frustrated sigh, and Gunther stared at him thoroughly unimpressed. Come on guys, let's get back to looking, Eld said, and they stalked off braiding his teeth. He glared at the squirrel. You little bastard, if you don't stop following me I'll choke the life out of you. You hear me? He hissed in a whisper, making sure the others couldn't hear him. Hand steady, he rose from the mud, wiping away all the dirt from his clothes, but just as he turned around to go after the others he was met by my blue eyes and blonde hair upside down. Though the sudden hysterical scream had made a bolt of dread and fear shoot down their guts that had definitely been all you will, no doubt about it, so they've rushed back in breakneck speeds, abandoning their horses, and no thoughts spared for excessive gas usage. The sight that had greeted them upon arriving had not been what they'd expected at all. Instead of finding all you were fighting for his life against the Titan, or even worse, already dead, what had welcomed them was all you still covered in mud. Face furiously read as he shook their apparent target by the collar while the blonde was laughing his ass off. All you, oh, what happened? Wait, is that our targets? His words drowned by all you ozone and raged yells. You little, what do you think you're doing? Huff. For a second they just watched, then looked at each other, equal parts confused and relieved, and unhorsed to approach the two. Hey, calm down all you, oh, calm down. Need the guy? Whole man. With some difficulty Eld and Gunther were able to separate the two before all you could cause any harm. What happened all you all? Why did you scream, and how come he's here all of a sudden? Petra asked. I got up to follow you guys, and when I turn around this guy is suddenly right in my face upside down. Eld raised an eyebrow, eyeing the newcomer apprehensively. So he scared you? No, he just caught me by surprise, that's all you all defended. Slightly red-faced, the blonde guy made an impersonation of all you's girlish scream, then went on chuckling while wiping away a mirthful tear from the corner of his eye. Oliva went stiff as a board, tick mark on his forehead and veins throbbing. His fingers were twitching madly and his teeth ground so hard Eld was afraid he'd shatter them with peer pressure. Petra eyed the blonde curiously. He didn't look any older than she was, perhaps even a year or two younger, but no more than that. Surely his orange and black outfit was a sore sight for eyes discolored by dried mud and grime. His eyes were as blue as the sky and hair a myth of golden spikes held up by a headband with a metal piece engraved with a strange symbol. And were those whiskers on his weeks? Gunther glanced at Eld. This is mission accomplished. Then I'll fire off acoustic round. The shot was fired into the air, a sound almost loud enough to rival cannon fire echoing throughout the forest. All wildlife that may have remained close by flight at that point, and the birds flew away in frantic droves. Naruto's chuckle cut off abruptly, and his eyes whipped to the gun held in L's hand. His entire demeanor changed in the blink of an eye, and his poise went from relaxed and cheerful to guarded and careful, almost making her question if his earlier display of good humor had been real at all. His eyes darted from L to Gunther to all you and to herself, and with a start she realized they were all still holding their blades, probably making him anxious. She sheathed her blades hurriedly and gestured at him placatingly. It's all right, we don't mean you any harm. See, there's no need to be afraid. The others also seemed to notice their own weapons and followed her lead, sheathing theirs as well. Boom. Guessing you're this Naruto that Erwin told us about. He said to bring you to him. If we found you, please follow us, Beld said, beckoning for Naruto to follow. The stranger eyed them all for a second before bobbing his head. Hi, or no Namoa Naruto Desu Erwin Naokoto 9 Atamasu POV swap. Then Erwin, I know it seems like we'll be meeting our guests soon. They all watched from up high as the newcomer made his way into the temporary camp led by the implacable Special Operations Squad. Hushed whispers of excitement with an underlying note of awe broke out amongst the soldiers as Levi turned to his commander. There's no mistaking it, that the guy we met out in the field. Erwin gave a slight hum of agreement, but his eyes never left the child that had so suddenly vanished only a couple of hours ago. A smart thing to do, Levi thought to himself, else the kid might just poof away again. Next to them, Hands grinned widely, fixing her spectacles to examine the child that had been the source of gossip these past hours. So that's him, Levi? You sure he did all those incredible things that the soldiers were talking about? He doesn't look like much from what I can see. He doesn't seem to have the superhuman build required for those feats, Hands said doubtingly. He doesn't look like much, but I saw it with my own eyes, hench, and you won't believe it until you see it either. Mike Nanaba Erwin addressed the two other squad captains standing on a thick tree branch a short distance away. Gather your squads and have them watch out for any possible threats. The two nodded and flew off to do his bid. Levi, make sure your squad knows to be on guard. He's an unknown factor. If things go south, I want him captured, not killed. He's not something we can afford to lose. His expression tightened. We're going down in unison. They glid down effortlessly, descending slowly on the counterweight provided by the 3DMG. The boy Naruto watched them keenly, his azure eyes dissecting their approaching figures, probing for anything that might give away less than honest intentions. Levi knew those eyes. They were the same he saw every day in the downtrodden slums that was underground. Landing softly with the grace built on years as veteran soldiers, they stood opposite to the child. Silence having descended now that the commander had decided to make his move. Levi noticed that Erwin hadn't ordered for the other soldiers to disperse, but it was understandable. This was something everyone here deserved to experience, to give them hope, to finally give everyone some semblance of contentment, so that they would know that the Survey Corps was closer to the truth than ever before, and that their sacrifices up until this point hadn't been in vain. Hello again. Naruto, Erwin said calmly, offering a hand and greeting. The kid smiled lightly, seemingly on edge. No wonder everyone was watching, with looks varying from suspicious and apprehensive to nervous and odd. Erwin to Levi Daoni, Naruto said, taking Erwin's hand and giving it a slight shake, then nodding to Levi in acknowledgement. And this is Hannah. Sudden squeal from hands cut off Erwin mid-sentence, and she immediately rushed towards Naruto in a burst of mad glee, her eyes shining with a burning hunger for knowledge. It all happened in an instant. The kid's eyes widened slightly, then sharpened dangerously. Hans's hand reached for his own, probably in an attempt at an overexcited handshake, but before she could even touch him, he grabbed her wrist, flipped her around and into the dirt, and whipped out what could only be described as a metal spear tip on a short handle. Levi cursed and reached for his blade, but Erwin held an arm out. Pulled Erwin. He pulled. That's an order. Levi scowled, but did as ordered. It was rare for Erwin to use his authority over him. What? Hans murmured from her precarious position in the dirt. Naruto. The kid's eyes were firm. Let her go. She didn't mean any harm. Erwin spoke gently, motioning for him to calm down, then pointing to Hans and making a come over here gesture ever so slowly. The brat relented, withdrawing his weapon and standing straight. Hans propped herself up on her knees, cradling her arm gently, her face contorted in mild pain. Naruto's eyes held a tinge of confusion before softening into a look that in all honesty fit with what Erwin expected of his character. He proceeded to gently lift hand ends to her feet, careful not to touch her arm. She looked a bit surprised at first, but took it in stride once she was up. Naruto donned a sheepish look, the corners of his mouth quirking up into an awkward smile, and hand gently rubbing the back of his head. He of Gomen. Hands turned and headed back to her commander's side, a chuckle rising from within. Levi tried to relax. TCH, that should teach you to keep your hands to yourself. Shitty glasses. She's too damn reckless for her own good. She paid him no mind, however, inspecting her arm curiously. Damn, his grip's like an iron vice. Bruised my arm with raw force. Hinge, are you all right? Erwin questioned. I'm fine, all right, he said before addressing the mass of stunned soldiers overhead, some who stood at the ready, with blades out, uncertain as to whether they should intervene, most notably Moblet, who looked ready to charge. The rest of you report to either Nanabo or Mike for guarding duty. Will be staying for a while longer, it seems. You sure? That's wise, Erwin. We didn't plan for an extra day out here. It'll be pushing on our gas reserves. I know. They all watched from up high as the newcomer made his way into their temporary camp led by the implacable Special Operations Squad. Hushed whispers of excitement with an underlying note of awe broke out amongst the soldiers as Levi turned to his commander. There's no mistaking it. That's the guy we met out in the field. Erwin gave a slight hum of agreement, but his eyes never left the child that had so suddenly vanished only a couple of hours ago. A smart thing to do, Levi thought to himself, else the kid might just poof away again. Next to them, Hans grinned widely, fixing her spectacles to examine the child that had been the source of gossip these past hours. So that's him, Levi. You sure he did all those incredible things that the soldiers were talking about? He doesn't look like much from what I can see. He doesn't seem to have the superhuman build required for those feats, fans said doubtingly. Oh, he doesn't look like much, but I saw it with my own eyes, Hench, and you won't believe it until you see it. Either Mike, Nanaba, Erwin addressed the two other squad captain, and standing on a fig tree branch a short distance away, gather your squads and have them watch out for any possible threats. The two nodded and flew off to do as bid. Levi, make sure your squad knows to be on guard. He's unknown factor. If things go south, I want him captured, not killed. He's not something we can afford to lose. His expression tightened. We're going down. In unison they glid down effortlessly, descending slowly on the counterway provided by the 3D MG. The boy Naruto watched them keenly, his azure eyes dissecting their approaching figures, probing for anything that might give away less than honest intentions. Levi knew those eyes. They were the same he saw every day in the downtrodden slums that was the underground landing. Softly, with the grace built on years as veteran soldiers, they stood opposite to the child, a silence having descended now that the commander had decided to make his move. Levi noticed that Erwin hadn't ordered for the other soldiers to disperse, but it was understandable. This was something everyone here deserved to experience, to give them help, to finally give everyone some semblance of contentment, so that they would know that the Survey Corps was closer to the truth than ever before, and that their sacrifices up until this point hadn't been in vain. Hello again, Naruto, Erwin said calmly, offering a hand and greeting. The kid smiled lightly, seemingly on edge. No wonder everyone was watching, with looks varying from suspicious and apprehensive to nervous and odd. Erwin to Levi da Yoni, Naruto said, taking Erwin's hand and giving it a slight shake, then nodding to Levi in acknowledgement. And this is him. A sudden squeal from Hans cut off Erwin mid-sentence, and she immediately rushed towards Naruto in a burst of mad glee, her eyes shining with a burning hunger for knowledge. It all happened in an instant. The kid's eyes widened slightly, then sharpened dangerously. Fans's hand reached for his own, probably in an attempt at an overexcited handshake, but before she could even touch him, he grabbed her wrist, flipped her around and into the dirt, and whipped out what could only be described as a metal spear tip on a short handle. Levi cursed and reached for his blade, but Erwin held an arm out. Hold, Erwin. He hold. That's an order. Levi scowled, but did as ordered. It was rare for Erwin to use his authority over him. Oh, what? Hans murmured from her precarious position in the dirt. Now, Naruto, the kid's eyes were firm. Let her go. She didn't mean any harm. Erwin spoke gently, motioning for him to calm down, then pointing to Hans and making a come over here gesture ever so slowly. The brat relented, withdrawing his weapon and standing straight. Hans propped herself up on her knees, cradling her arm gently, her face contorted in mild pain. Naruto's eyes held a tinge of confusion before softening into a look that in all honesty fit with what Erwin expected His character, he proceeded to gently lift hands to her feet, careful not to touch her arm. She looked a bit surprised at first, but took it in stride once she was up. Naruto donned a sheepish look, the corners of his mouth quirking up into an awkward smile, and hand gently rubbing the back of his head. He of Gomen hands turned and headed back to her commander's side. A chuckle rising from within. Levi tried to relax. TCH, that should teach you to keep your hands to yourself. Shitty glasses, she's too damn reckless for her own good. She paid him no mind, however, inspecting her arm curiously. Damn, his grip's like an iron vice. Bruised my arm with raw force hinge. Are you all right? Erwin questioned. I'm fine, Paul. Right, he said before addressing the mass of stunned soldiers overhead, some who stood at the ready with blades out, uncertain as to whether they should intervene, most notably Moblet, who looked ready to charge. The rest of you report to either Nanabo or Mike for guarding duty. Will be staying for a while longer, it seems. You sure? That's wise, Erwin. We didn't plan for an extra day out here. It'll be pushing on our gas reserves. I know. Levi watched the kids silently, only listening to Erwin and Han's conversation with half an ear. The kid unnerved him somehow. The kid reminded him of his old mentor Kenny. So how do we decide if he's really from outside the walls? Angie asked. How can we be absolutely sure he isn't just some genuine freak of nature? He speaks a different language, Hange, Levi stated. As a matter of fact, is it though? A different language? I mean, he could be speaking gibberish for all we know. No, Erwin said, looking down contemplatively, thinking back to the field and just now with our little incident. He spoke with purpose. Hange acknowledged his point. Perhaps his parents taught him he could be a descendant from another bloodline like the Orientals Hands supplied, except they would have taught him the common tongue as well, Levi said. Besides, no one's ever seen anyone with those kinds of abilities, and few enough possess such a mastery of martial arts. Someone with his skills wouldn't go unnoticed, thought by us, and definitely not by the MPS. Erwin shared a knowing look with Levi, mind flashing back to how he'd initially recruited the corporal. Yeah, makes sense. So how do we proceed? Erwin Hange asked. Hange, get us a map. Erwin had one of soldiers go fetch Petra and Naruto Bell. He'd initially intended for Levi to keep an eye on him, but he seemed a bit on edge around the teen. Also, Naruto appeared to be more comfortable around Petra than some of the other soldiers, so she'd been assigned to keep him company until they were done discussing matters. Finally, the two arrived, and Han knelt to place the map on the ground for a wind motion for Naruto to crouch down as well before pointing to their map. Naruto, was your home? Where do you come from? Naruto eyed the map with puzzlement as if uncertain, and Erwin tried once more. Emotion to himself, then to the interior of Walrus, before pointing to Naruto and the map, trying to convey his question as well as possible. Naruto remained motionless for a second, after which he placed a finger at a point far off the map. Han's eyes lit up, and Erwin himself felt a surge of, was it strength, hope, or perhaps just relief? He really is from outside the walls, Petra whispered almost reverently. Moblet watched Hands curiously. She'd been staring at Naruto for a while now with a somewhat befuddled look. You all right, squad leader? HMO Moblet, I'm fine, just wondering, is all about what. She put a hand to her chin in contemplation. Just how someone of his size with no visible physical attributes beyond the normal could do all those things that the soldiers said he did. I doubt everything they said is true. Feats like those tend to be exaggerated, Moblet answered. All I can't wait till we get back. All those experiments waiting to be done. She clasped her hands with a sigh, almost drooling at the mere thought. Moblet eyed the blonde sympathetically. Poor guy. Oi, 4 eyes, stop daydreaming. We're going to depart soon. Moblet straightened instinctively when Corporal Levi appeared, his face devoid of any emotion. Moblet raised an eyebrow in surprise. Sir, at night? Yeah, Erwin doesn't want us using any more gas than necessary, but won't it be difficult to move with no light? I thought that was the whole reason we went on expeditions during day, despite the safety provided by nightfall. Levi sighed. That's true, but dawn will be breaking soon. The Titans don't wake up immediately, nor does the light hit everywhere at the same time, so if we're lucky we'll have a safer return trip than usual. Moblet nodded, and Hands decided to voice her own question. So has Erwin decided what we do with that one when we get back to the walls? She nodded to the figure of Naruto, who sat resting on a heavy branch overhead, using his spear knife to cut at a piece of wood. Tana, he'd called it when he'd caught Levi staring at it. He thinks a private meeting with Zach Lee might be the best option, perhaps Pixis as well, otherwise we'll try to keep it quiet for the time being. We'd like to postpone telling the public until we have something more concrete. Levi crossed his arms and leaned sideways on one of the trees. We'll have to smuggle him, and won't do to have people seeing a civilian with us, nor do we want to give the government any more ammunition in their fight to shut down the Survey Corps. Hinge nodded. Right, claims that we're being irresponsible and letting civilians outside the walls won't be good. We'll have him hide in one of the supply carts, or with injured keep him hidden away, Levi explained, then turned his head to gaze back to where he'd come from, watching his squad gearing up. Anyway, you should start packing up and get ready. Like I said, we'll depart soon. Oi, Naruto, get down here, Levi yelled, motioning for the blonde to come down. When he caught Naruto's attention, Naruto jumped down, landing softly without a sound. Some of the soldiers nearby watched him with awe whispers. Amazing, did he just? While Maria, they weren't joking, all reaching his ears. Naruto walked up to Levi, flicking his head as if to ask what's up. Levi took out a map from inside his coat, then pointed to themselves and then to the walls. Lee, going home, understand? Naruto watched the map for a second before nodding and going after Levi. When he waved for Naruto to follow, you get on horse, all you will try for the umpteenth time, pointing sharply to Naruto, then the horse next to them, and for the umpteenth time. Naruto shook his head. Broward, what's wrong with you? Just get on the damn horse. Behind him, El chuckled, and Gunther smiled amused. Petra on the other hand sighed. Calm down, all you. Shouting won't make him understand. Alright, you try it then. He gritted out from between clenched teeth. Naruto, please, you need to get on the horse, she said pleadingly, but Naruto just shook his head. What's going on here? Levy asked, appearing next to them. His squad straightened as per usual before Eld answered, Captain Levy, sir, he doesn't want to get on the horse. No matter how much we try, he just refuses. He heard all. You'll mumble something like you didn't even try, and Levy raised an eyebrow. Brat. Get on the horse, he said sternly, but the blonde shook his head all the same. For a second Petra thought Levy might decide to knock some sense into the teen, but was surprised when he didn't bat an eye. Suit yourself, your own fault if you end up tight. But sir, if he doesn't have a horse he'll get eaten, Petra complained worriedly. Petra, you've heard the rumors. No doubt, and I've seen him take down a titan personally with his bare hands. Mind you, he can handle himself, and if he can't, that's on him, Libby replied, then walked off without so much as a look back. When she looked ready to keep arguing, El interjected, just let it go, Petra, you heard him. Besides, the kid's supposed to be some sort of superhuman. Or something like that at least, and if anything does go wrong we'll be there to help. Also, Captain might act as if he doesn't give a damn, but you know he'd be the first to stick his neck out for the kid. You know how he is, Gunther added, grinning. You're right, Petra relented with a sigh before turning to the teen, watching curiously as some soldiers put on their gear. Come, Naruto, we need to get in position, she called, and he whipped around and followed without a word. Amazing, he's actually keeping up with us, Feld whispered as they rode back towards Kareni's district. Holy, he's fast as a horse. How long can he keep it up though? Won't he gas out soon? The other soldiers exclaimed, amazed at Naruto's speed. It had been decided that the Survey Corps would ride back as a whole. Only a few had died during this mission, and there were few wounded, but without those soldiers, and with the addition national men needed to keep them safe, the formation would be spread out too thin. Deployed also to keep the long-range scouting formation going, all soldiers needed to be able to fight titans if necessary, and with the gas supply depleted as it was, Erwin didn't want to risk it. Instead, they opted to have small squads consisting of 2 and 3 stationed around the main force to retain some semblance of reconnaissance. Erwin turned Levy, is there any particular reason why Naruto doesn't have a horse? The brat refused to get on one when we told him to. Either that or he's too stupid to understand what we tried to tell him. I see. Oh well, amazing, he hasn't even broken a sweat. Levy Hands yelled, fascinated. I wonder how long he'll be able to keep it up. Sure, we're not going as fast as we could have, but we're still riding at close to 40 kilometers per hour. Shut up, Hinge, Levy retorted to her excited rambling. If he keeps this going we'll have to put him on one of the carts with the wounded. He's bound to tire out soon. His eyes glinted. Not necessarily. What do you mean? Erwin questioned from where he rode next to them. At him, Erwin is breathing as even. He's not sweating and still keeping up with the horses. Horses have larger and stronger lungs than humans. It's why they can maintain such a high speed for a long time, but humans can outrun even a horse in a long distance run if paced correctly. What? But how? Hinge Petra asks curiously. Well, my dear Petra, that's because we cool by sweating rather than panting. Humans can stay cool at speeds distances that would overheat most other animals, which means that if Naruto here can keep going at this speed without breathing issues, he'll most likely outrun our horses to the wall. Petra, Luo, Gunther, and Eld, alongside some of the soldiers who had overheard Hange and even the usually stoic Mike, all gaped at that. Even Erwin looked stunned. Naruto, for his part, just kept grinning, seemingly enjoying the looks of dumbfounded incredulity on their faces. After a couple hours of riding, the looming figure of Walrose was finally close enough that Erwin deemed it time to hide Naruto. Have Naruto get in one of the carts, Levy, Erwin said, and make sure to have a member of your squad keep an eye on him at all times. Levy nodded and ordered for El to get into one of the supply carts along with Naruto. The teen seemed skeptical at first but relented, seeing the serious look on Levy's face. It was dangerous what we're doing. Levy knew Naruto's presence would undoubtedly cause an uproar, and keeping his existence hidden from the public any amount of time would make their eventual blow up even worse. But whatever the case, Erwin had decided to confer with Zach Lee and Pixis before revealing such a groundbreaking discovery. Of course, the scouts had been ordered not to breathe a word about Naruto, though it was only a matter of time. In Levy's opinion, some loudmouth would no doubt babble their secret, and it would all go to his thoughts came to a halt as the gate to Kareni's lifted. Before even entering, Levy could see that there were people beginning to gather near the gate line up along the streets, ready to watch the Survey Corps return from another expedition. This mission in its entirety had been a success. They had put up a supply station in the forest of giant trees and returned with a much lower casualty rate than usual. However, that fact seemed lost on the civilians around them as per usual. TCH, what a waste of taxes, someone in the crowd said loud enough for the scouts to overhear. Our money is just going to fatten those titans, mark my words. Someday they're going to end up leading those monsters, and then we'll lose Walrose as well. Randoms kept speaking up from within the crowds, but they were ignored as usual. Shouting back at them made no difference. Besides, this time was different. They might not be able to say it out loud, but every Survey Corps member here knew that those words couldn't have been any more wrong this time around. It made Levy want to grin almost. It was a long trek back to Survey Corps HQ, but they got there in the end. In the safety of the walls and privacy of the headquarters, they could finally thoroughly question their latest discovery, squeeze out every single piece of information, and finally get some answers. Truth of this world, it was within his reach at last. Erwin felt guilty at the mere thoughts. Father, this is it. He turned to Nanaba. Bring him to my office. She nodded and approached the carriage in which Naruto was situated. Hans sprang up next to him, Levi strolling lazily behind her. I can't wait, I have so many questions. Hans looked more excited than ever, and even Levi sported a slight smile. A sudden sharp intake of breath stopped them dead in their tracks, and whipped around at the sound, eyes finding Nanaba, a sudden dread creeping itself into his stomach. Then Abba, what is it? Levi questioned, fearing the answer. He's not here. She turned around and gave them a wide-eyed stare. He's gone. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video, and comment down your opinion on this video. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.